Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Kitchen time. Two new plants, so I thought I'd get on with these. This is coming to the end of what turned out to be a ridiculously long day, not planned, but I had watering to do this morning. Normal early morning is sort out all my comments and stuff, my YouTube stuff, sort out Facebook stuff and do all the computery type stuff. Get my bleary eyes and bleary mind going via various or frequent cups of coffee. So I got that out of the way and got on with my watering, and partway through my watering my back started to hurt, and it hasn't done that for a hell of a long time, and because when it seriously goes wrong it puts me out of action almost for some time, so I have to get ultra cautious. So we had to slow right down with the watering, minimise the bending and the twisting, and gently. So we've done all that, and then I thought I ought to get on with my talk. This is the second part of the so-called beginner's tale, which is really going from the very early days through building the grow room, getting it how I wanted it, and then filling it up with plants. and then basically partway through, about halfway or just over, the fact that I sort of specialised in the Dendrobiums, and then the rest of the talk is just about the Dendrobiums. And I sat down and made a start, and sometimes you just get in the mood for something, and it was one of those days. So I was digging out old clips that were filmed before Christmas, you know, resting type Dendrobiums going into winter, and I saved all those clips away for this. Finding them and sorting them out took some flipping time, but I've cracked on with that today. I think I'm up to about 25, maybe 30 minutes worth of talk, so I've only got sort of 15-20 minutes to go, but the tail end of it will need newly filmed clips of the plants as they are now, many in full bloom, which was the object, to lead it up, you know, the point of sorting your plants out through winter to get the goal, the blooming in the spring. So that's coming on really well. I'm pleased with that. I think I can safely say that will be ready to put up on YouTube next week, so you can all have a look, do the spell checking and all that sort of stuff. You can't spell check a video, it's not possible. So hopefully I'll be able to get that posted next week, because effectively that talk's got to go out the second Saturday of May, so not that far away, which is one of the reasons I thought I'd better crack on with it. But it's been a long day, my back is twinging a little bit, but I wanted to end the day on something I enjoy doing, rather than just sitting there griping about my backache. And you'll have to put up with the dressing gown. It's been a dressing gown day. I'll make sure nothing untoward is visible, frighten the kids like hairy legs or anything like that. But because my back started, I didn't bother getting dressed, because I knew I was going to end the day with a nice long soak in the bath. So there's not a lot of point in getting dressed to get undressed again. I didn't need to go out. So we'll get these two new plants out. The aggregatum, officially really this is lindleyi now. It's always been Lindley's Dendrobium, so where the hell aggregatum really came from is difficult to say. And these are both small pots, so I haven't got my tray in. I'm not going to make a lot of mess, and I'm hoping that most of the roots on this plant are going to stay there. This is good bark. Even the bark in the centre of this is rock hard, and there's no sign of any moss lurking anywhere. There's a little bit round the base of the plant, but not a lot. So I haven't got a lot to do to this. I will try and get as much of the older bark off as possible, but some of them, I mean that huge bit there is really well attached, and those are the latest growth, so these are new roots under here. So that bit of bark will have to stay there. I'm not tearing those roots. I'm just teasing, so I'm just after the loose bits, and anything that stays there can stay there. But the time this comes off its mount next time round, the roots that are involved with this bark will probably long since have died. Yeah, there is a tiny little bit of moss up in the centre there, so I will give it a run under the tap. But it's minimal, and bearing in mind it's going to go on moss on a mount anyway, it's not the end of the world. And that's not a bad root system at all. Well impressed. I mean, I've got my scissors out ready to trim off all the dead roots. And quite honestly, I don't think I'm going to bother. There's a few broken ones here. But there's next to nothing to come off of this plant, quite honestly. Not for its first mount anyway. But as I said, some of these bits of bark are on, you know, you can see the progress of that plant basically. Seedling bulbs down here, tiny little ones, some of which have still got their leaves, gradually progressing up through to the size of the bulbs now, the latest growths, and we have new growths coming, several. So should push on quite well. The new growth here, and this is what I was just saying about my Jenkinsii, and the varieties of orchids that look like this with the squatty little bulbs and the thick leathery leaves. There's a little set of them. I think there's about 5 altogether, but don't always expect the new growths to come out of the latest growths. They don't. I mean, if you look at this growth here, that bulb's probably 1.5 years old, maybe more. This is last year's growths, these big fat ones, and there's a new growth there, but this new growth's coming out back here. That one's coming out of the area of new growths. So yeah, you know, they can come out. There won't be any new growths from the seedling bulbs, but for the time being there's no point in taking those off. They've got leaves on. I mean, there's one leafless one, but if I try and take that one off, these are going to come off as well, and these have got leaves on. They're functional, so they can stay. You know, as even one of the older bulbs, you know, the newer bulbs, has lost a leaf, and again here, I'm just checking that they're firm, not any form of rot. But it's a quite evenly balanced plant. I'm quite pleased with that, and I'm quite pleased with the fact I haven't got to play with the roots. They're going to stay there, basically. I'm not going to play with them at all. So that's that one. That's not bad. And thanks for everybody who identified this thing for me, because I really did not have a clue and I could not read that tag. So I think I've got some doctors that watch my channel to have been able to actually read that tag, or maybe you just knew what it was. But I'm suspecting this is going to fall apart into lots of tiny little pieces. There you go. That's what I thought. It's just a lot of little pieces of a type of plant, and they've just all been plonked in together. But as it's going to be, I mean, that's in one piece there. That's not a bad piece there. Oh no, it's still 2. But if you look at the base of some of the pieces, they're not good. They're not healthy. But these spindly little things here are aerial roots. So if this is strapped onto a mount flat, which is how it's going to go, the base of these pieces, I mean, like this bit's here is rotten, so that needs trimming. But I can get these pieces flat against a mount, and those aerial roots can then start doing something, excuse me, despite the fact that the base has no roots. They may not grow. I remember getting a freebie once before in a state like this, and I think it took about 2 weeks and it was dead as a doornail. But I'm hoping to save this. The blooms on this are quite attractive. I don't know what to do with a piece like that. But this isn't rotten, it's just not great. So it can stay, because it's, you know, 2 leads effectively growing away from a joint effort down here. So I'm going to leave those pieces, and we'll see what it does. They're not going to rot now because they're out of what they were in, which is quite a soily sort of stuff, peaty based stuff. But anyway, thanks for identifying it. I still haven't learnt the name, so I'll do a pop-up when I get round to it. So, you know, the base of that piece is quite rotten. That one's gone completely. But I'll try trimming it and see if it'll grow. You know, it's got aerial roots. It may have enough to just about get hold of itself. So we'll give that a basic trim on any pieces like this, and we'll mount that flat. Right, so we've got the lindleyi. I'm going to stop calling it aggregatum. I had a look up, and although it was Lindley's Dendrobium, so obviously a Mr. Lindley or a Mrs. Lindley or a Miss, or a mus, found it and decided to put their name to it, and that name seemed to be dropped not long after. Don't forget, we're going back into the 1800s now. long time ago, even before me. And basically, from what I can find out, that was named officially lindleyi in 1970 something. So it should have been called that a hell of a long time. But apparently the two names have been set up as synonyms. But I'm going to start calling that lindleyi because it's not like it's a recent name change. And it's not really a name change. It sounds to me like it's more like reverting to what it was originally called. Who knows? It's all in a name, and I'll call it Fred if I like. But anyway, we'll get that mounted. So we'll have a little bit of a clear up, not much, and I'll get some mounts sorted, and then we'll strap them on and go from there. I'll be back. Okay, let's go then. I believe in recycling. If you remember, the Jenkins CI came off of that, and I did say there's nothing wrong with that, so that's where aggregatum's going to go for now. And the tiny little pieces of thing, again, I can't even remember what was once on that mount, but something was. It has been used. I don't worry about taking little bits of roots off. Fiddle about with that for flipping ages. So something has been on there. So either it was something that was taken off a mount and tried in a pot, or something that didn't make it. Either way, it's recyclable. We can reuse that. Now, I know very little about this little plant, but what I do know is it obviously didn't like being in anything soggy, yeah, which gives me the impression that this is not going to need a huge amount of moss, because it's going to depend on these aerial roots doing something as it extends upwards. It's got a very strange growth pattern now that I've looked at it a bit closer. Produces a little growth with a few leaves, and then from the top of that growth produces the next one and a few leaves, and that's how it progresses. And the joints are really tiny. It's a very strange habit, but it does look like it's a climber. I mean, there's no doubt about that. It reminds me of the polybulbon that I've got. That sort of grows along the same lines, except for it grows like a flipping weed, or it does for me. What this is going to grow like, I don't know, if it lives. But I don't believe it needs a lot of moss. As I say, I get the impression that this would be creeping its way up a trunk or something along those lines, and using those, what are aerial roots at the moment because it was in a pot, to attach itself as it climbs. And who knows, maybe the older part of the plant sort of dies off, but by then, you know, the top of the plant is well attached. So I don't want this plant being soggy. It certainly wasn't happy in its pot of sogginess, so we'll try it with a lot more air around it. Stay. Right. This is going to be a little bit fiddly, obviously, because it's lots of little pieces. And I'm going to arrange these as I go. I know what I mean. You know, I'll start at the bottom, and what I'm going to do is the parts that look most vigorous are going to go at the bottom of the mount, and those that don't look like they might not even make it can go near the top. And then if they don't make it, they can just be taken off, and the ones that are more vigorous at the base of the mount can grow up in the gap. If they all make it, they can all sort of mingle in together. So I'm going to start quite low on the mount, so I need a little bit of extra moss down there. I'm literally going to start right at the base of the mount and work upwards and get a reasonable covering. But I don't want to get too near to the top of the mount for obvious reasons. If this is a climber and I put pieces at the top of the mount, the first thing they're going to do is climb off the top. But it doesn't look like it branches that often, although it does branch, so it might head off sideways as well. But until I try this, I don't know what's going to happen. So these are all assumptions, basically. I did have a quick look at this. There's not a lot of information around, apart from it's a cool grower. And the blooms are actually quite attractive. I was impressed. Delicate little sort of yellow blooms with orangey bits on, and they're sort of bell shaped, so it's actually quite, you know, the blooms are quite attractive. So we're going to start by plonking that bit there. That bit's going to go next to it, slightly tucked under. So that's the base of the plant. And then, don't be silly, Roger, start at the top. If you're going to put pieces on top of pieces, start at the top. And then when you put the pieces on, you can work downwards, which makes far more sense. And once this is on there, this is going to look like, and that tatty little bit I'm not sure is going to make it, so that can just go near the top. In case it doesn't, then I can just take it off. And then all I'm going to do with this, I said, go up the top. I didn't say go up the top and then promptly fall off, did I? You're not listening. Right, and then all I'm going to do is just not viciously but gently go round, just to sort of hold it in place. I don't want this garroted, and it's going to be virtually impossible to get the ties in under all of the leaves, so I am going to end up pinching some. I will do my best to sort of tuck the tie in underneath as much as I can, but it's not going to be possible to miss them all. And if the odd leaf keels over because it was pinched, I think it will leave more than enough to grow on, if you see what I mean. So it's not something I'm going to worry about extensively. Right, that's got it all on there. And now all I've got to do is diagonally come back down, because obviously I need to tie at the bottom of the mount round the back. I think that should hold. And then, like I've always said, if you start with a slip knot, when you get back to where you started from, you've got a V where your first loop headed off from, and that is a brilliant place to tie because it gives you something to pull against. And this doesn't all need to be tight. It's as I said, it's to hold the plant in place, not garrot it and start cutting into the stems and biting into leaves and all things like that. Yeah, there's nothing going to fall off. That will do nicely. And then we'll see what this does. As I said, there's not a huge amount of information about this, apart from where it comes from and the fact that it's a relatively cool grower. Well, don't forget I have others that are cool growers that just have to lump it. You know, they get the warmer temperatures, but it's compensated by pretty high humidity and airflow. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't do very well. And the other end of the scale is I've got some cooler growers, some warmer growers that don't like my winter. Because in my winter, my priority is my dendrobiums, and they need that coolness. So anything that doesn't like it can flipping lump it. Because my dendrobiums really take priority. Those are my thing, I suppose you could say. How that happened, I really don't know. It just happened. It wasn't planned, trust me. I did not at some point suddenly decide, right, I'm going to go for dendrobiums. That never happened. Those thoughts never entered my head. But what did happen is a couple of good eBay sellers supplying virtually specimen-sized plants that happen to be dendrobiums, and it sort of got the interest going. And then it was a matter of looking for more, which I did, found them, and well, you've seen the results. Now what I plan to do with this is, I have got a little bit of moss underneath it because these new growths are going to progress upwards and produce new roots. They need a little bit to get into. But a lot of these roots are going to hang off the bottom of the mount. And the reason is the growth initially on this mount is going to go upwards and possibly out sideways. So I have got a little bit of moss underneath the plant, which is not normal for me. Actually, I'm going to take a little bit off because there's moss in places that is serving no purpose, and I need a bit more lower down, and I really can't be, well, I nearly said a rude word then, bothered I think is the appropriate word, to go and get some more. So it's having what I've got here. And this is loosely placed, yeah, loosely placed. Always thinking this is a winter rester. And if I need to be able to rest this in the winter, I need to be able to give it little tiny drops of water now and again. And a huge wad of sphagnum moss does not lend itself to doing tiny little bits of water, because it will stay wet too long because of the lower temperatures. So the roots that are hanging out the bottom are not a problem, yeah, because they will still hydrate. When I water them, they will get soaked, and those that are in the moss have got longer to hydrate the plant, and then we will get new roots. And I'd still like that lower down actually. I'm just going to move it down a little bit. This probably isn't going to stay on this mount more than maybe even one growing season. Next spring we might have to move it. When this takes off, this is a vigorous grower, and unlike Jenkins's eye, it's a lot bigger. The bulbs, I mean the bulbs on here can get bigger than that. The leaves are an awful lot bigger. Jenkins's eye leaves are this sort of size. You know, these are already sort of heading up towards 3 inches long. It's a much larger plant. And quite honestly, it's as vigorous as Jenkins's eye, but with its additional size, it's going to take up a lot more space quite quickly. So I think this may only be on its mount until next spring. Whether I get on any blooms on it next spring, I don't know. I've still yet to decide, depending on what it does this season, whether I even rest it, whether I give it a full rest to try and attempt to get it to bloom. I will only do that if it's a strong, healthy plant with lots of new growths that have reached full size, in addition to the ones I've already got. If that happens, I'll consider resting it. If not, I won't. And when I don't rest a winter rester, all that happens really is, yes, I reduce the feed to nothing, I reduce the water quite dramatically, but not as much as I would if I was giving it a full rest. It's as simple as that. I try and keep it what I would call ticking over. Right, so those two turns that hold the moss in place, and then the next couple I'm going to go right over the top of the pseudo bulbs, but in front of the new ones, but behind the old ones, the little seedling bulbs. They're still at the front of the plant. That'll hold it in place, and then I've got a couple of new pseudo bulbs that are touching the mount, and I'm just going to go, I've got the curvature of the mount here helping me because it's concave, whereas it's normally the other way round because I'm on the back of the mount. I can go over the top of those top two good, you know, the top two leaves sticking out the highest without actually pinching them. All it's going to do is hold them in place and stop the plant lurching forward, because that's the last thing we want. Right, I can't go round again, so we will tie at that point. And again, you can see where I started, I have an automatic V, and it gives me perfect place to pull my first knot and pull it tight, because it's got something to bind against. It's just something that happened. It wasn't planned as well. It was the first mount I ever did. When I came to tie the end off, I thought, oh, that's handy, because trying to tie fishing line in the air is almost impossible. You've got nothing to pull against. So just happened by chance. More luck than judgment. Right, so that is not at all wobbly. I'm happy with that, and we will see what happens. We've got a new growth here and a new growth here. Both of those will produce roots and head the plant off in that direction. At the moment there are no new growths pointing up the top of the plant yet, but there may well be, and the other new growth is buried at the back pointing out that way. So again, in theory this year, most of the growth is going to be horizontal, not vertical, which means it's going to be fine on that mount for at least this year. Yeah. But we will see how it does, and yeah, it was a good idea not to take those little seedling bulbs off. They have got leaves. They all help with the, you know, feeding the plant with the photosynthesis. It all helps, every little bit. Especially when a plant's been, I won't say that plant's been just put under stress, not in the true sense, but obviously that's a little bit of an upset from it. You know, it has come out of one type of media and gone into another, and at the moment there's no new roots growing at all. It only has its existing roots to survive on and the food it can get through photosynthesis. Never forget that. That's still there. You know, even on a rootless plant, it can still sustain itself. The photosynthesis element of a plant's growth isn't going to let it grow much, but it could stop it dying. It can let it survive long enough to get some new growth and some new roots. So that's that one. And then this little one is, we'll see what happens with that. I haven't got a clue what's going to happen with that. But, you know, there's a new growth coming out here. It's the only one I can see at the moment. Oh, there's another one there. So we'll see what happens with it. And the stems have a branching nature in places. Not massively, but it does branch. So it could start shooting out anywhere, quite honestly. So we'll see how we go. So that's that one, and it's, as I said, it's late in the day today, which is Thursday, so that's Friday's video. Friday's a busy day. Got Orchid Society meeting in the evening, so the chances are I wouldn't have filmed tomorrow, so this can now be tomorrow's video, and Saturday's another day. We'll have a think about that when we get there. Don't think that far ahead with videos. As you know, most of the time I walk out in the grow room with the camera, turn it on and start rabbiting and pointing, and that's how they end up. It sort of seems to work, I suppose. Anyway, see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.